When did your gut feeling of something's not right here save you? I woke up at 3 AM once sitting upright in bed. I felt on alert and my heart raced when I saw that my cat was on alert too, wide awake by my feet with his ears perked up. But I didn't see or hear anything weird. Something didn't feel right and I couldn't relax. So I got up and went to the kitchen. Turned on some lights and ate food even though I wasn't that hungry. Eventually went back to bed. We discovered the next morning that someone had stopped while in the process of using some kind of tool to silently cut a big hole in the glass window in the living room. They were trying to break in. Right next to the bedroom. I think the lights I turned on scared them away. Edited to add that we had 3 long years of issues with our neighbors. They repeatedly came into our property and were pissed that we put up a 9-foot fence to keep them out. This attempted break-in happened right after the fence went up and 2 days before they all moved out. Glad those pieces of garbage are long gone. Worked as a shot girl at a pub. One night I rejected someone who attempted to get my number. Not unusual and he didn't seem that bothered. The whole exchange wasn't strange to me. In the early hours after the bar closed I went to leave through the back door into the car park like usual when I saw the sensor light outside was on. Someone was stood just outside the door. I felt uneasy so went out the front and asked one of the bouncers to walk me round the back to my car. As we rounded the corner we spotted this guy lurking outside the door holding his belt like a makeshift garrote. When he saw us he started screaming that I was a frickin' botch and I should die. He scampered off into the road and never came back. Someone came into my work that gave me the I'm in danger feeling. I work in a game arcade so 60% of my customers are children and I naturally get very protective of them, but you can't call the police because someone's creeping you out. He kept getting close to children but not doing anything or even making them uncomfortable so there still wasn't anything I could do. He leaves and I shrug it off. Another customer soon comes in and gives me the same feeling, so I'm thinking I'm just anxious today. He's talking about Donkey Kong and stuff. Casual conversation. Then he says I'm best friends with Martin Bryant, the spree killer from the 1996 Port Arthur massacre, who is in solitary confinement and can't even interact with whoever has to throw his food at him, so I'm getting a bit nervous now. Then the first creepy guy comes in, and the one I was talking to says I know him. We went to prison together so immediately I start having a panic attack and have to end the conversation as quick as possible so I can contact the manager to say I need someone else to come into the store. I was there alone, and they immediately call the police. Turns out they were both registered sex offenders. Neither were allowed anywhere near my work because it's too close to the CBD, and they're legally now allowed near anywhere that could have children there. I actually recently went to court for this. Waited hours to go in and he pleaded guilty at the very last second. Basta. He was hoping you wouldn't show and he'd be released for lack of witnesses. You did not waste your time staying. I'm a firefighter. We got called out to a tree fire started by fallen power lines. We pull up in the truck and I'm trusting that my driver and crew leader are doing their job and have good situational awareness. We get out of the truck and we're parked next to a set of power lines. Not fallen. It's a very windy night and I can see the lines swinging so I voice my concerns to my crew leader who says it'll be fine. We get out, hose out, risk of the tree fire catching onto a house outweighing potential risk of arcing plus the line disconnected when it fell, and I'm on the branch ready to start putting it out with 2 others near me when I get a chill. I look up, see the line swinging violently and yell everyone frickin' move. As the 3 of us sprint and dive out of the way we hear a thwip and crack and sure enough the line we were under came loose and stayed connected to the power pole. If I hadn't got that chill chances are we would have had 3 fried fireys. Damn, you would have become a fried fighter. Went to a college party and one of the guys made me feel very uncomfortable. He didn't ever do anything to me, but something seemed off. I kept dumping my shots because getting smashed seemed like a bad idea. I ended up taking a friend and leaving while he told us that we were being lame by not having more of the Grey Goose. He sexually assaulted another girl at the party that night. Well, I was walking home. Wasn't late and I'm from a pretty safe area, but it was that time of year when it starts to get dark really early, so felt kind of ominous. Anyway, I pass this guy in a red sweater and red tracksuit bottoms and he looks at me funny. Maybe he's high, maybe he's drunk. Either way, something not quite right about him. I keep going. Look behind me, he's still there. Cross the road. He crosses with me. As soon as I turn a corner, I sprint to my apartment complex and run into the coded gate and wait. He rocks up a minute later and stares at me through the gate. He just stares at me for a good 10 or so seconds, then runs back the way he came. Shivers. Was hunting for early morels and king bullets last May up near Clenelum. No luck, so went further over towards Hancock. About 2/3 up a hillside, I felt like I was being watched. I slowly realized that I couldn't hear any animals making noise. Hackles raised. I immediately started down the most direct path to my car. One trail above where I was parked, I saw a partial juvenile male deer skeleton under a large conifer. As I double-timed it past, I looked up and saw the rest of the bones and sinew slung up in the branches. Out came the knife and I slowed down, turning and scanning every few yards until I got into my car and booked it out of there. The next day, 2 mountain bikers were attacked by a cougar and one was killed very near to the area I was hiking. I carry a handgun now for my mushroom hunts. I experienced something kinda similar last year as well. My husband and I were hiking in western Washington on a trail we've done a handful of times. We start up the trail and are about a half mile in when I start to get a weird feeling. A few feet more and I turn to my husband and tell him that I think we should turn around. I had no reason other than I had a bad gut feeling and I could feel the hairs on my body standing. As expressed this to him, he looked kinda surprised and he said he was about to tell me the same thing. Normally I'm the one who can feel a little spooked on a trail, but in the years we've been hiking together, this was the first time he's ever felt off. Because of this, we listened to our gut feelings and headed back to the car. As we did, we noticed a deer carcass far off to the side that we must have missed on the way up. Although we never saw anything, I'm convinced we were being watched. The amount of relief when we got to the car was overwhelming. At age 5, I was almost abducted by strangers at the park who had a bunch of toys on a blanket and tried to lure me into their motorhome. I looked back to my dad, who was talking to his friend maybe 100 yards away. I got a tummy ache when one of them tried to coax me by reaching for my arm to lead me away, and I screamed and ran like hell back to my dad. Years later, I found out those same people had abducted other kids who weren't so lucky. Never ignored a gut feeling since. When I was in middle school and around 14 years old, I was returning home. I live like 5 minutes away from said school and I noticed there was a man following me. He wasn't looking at me, he was looking at his phone and he wore a cap, so I wasn't able to see his face fully. Anyways, he gave off this weird vibe. I reached my apartment building and the guy was still behind me. I know mostly everyone who lives in my neighborhood and I couldn't recall him. Last moment I decided I wasn't going to go inside the hallway. I turned around and went to a store where I waited for my mom to come. A few weeks after, there was some news about an 11-year-old girl from my school who was sexually assaulted in the building right behind mine 2 days after the incident. The guy they caught looked a lot like the guy who had followed me, and given the time frame and the proximity, there's a high chance that it was him. Posted this before. Took my 2 babies to an in-home daycare run by a lovely woman. About 9 days in, the woman's teenage son was home when I picked up my kids. He gave me a super creepy vibe. Pulled the kids from the daycare and placed them elsewhere. Maybe 10 years later, that kid murdered 2 people then killed his mom. My daughter was a year and a half at the time. She had a cold, but bedtime went off without a hitch. I woke up in the middle of the night that night, really uncomfortable and anxious. Something was off and I couldn't put my finger on it. I got up, had a midnight snack, tried to calm my nerves. I decided to check on my kids, who shared a room, before trying to go back to sleep. I get in there and immediately I hear a light sound coming from her crib, wheezing. It was so quiet, there was no way to hear it outside of the room. I got her up and saw that her breathing was fast and labored. I took her to the hospital, where she ended up with an overnight stay, oxygen, and nebulizer treatments because her oxygen had dipped. She was diagnosed with reactive airway disease due to the cold, which triggered the asthma attack. I had a similar experience with my son. He had just eaten, laid him down for the night, and went to sleep. I wake for no apparent reason but hear this choking sound. I rush to him, See formula at his mouth. Turn him and Heimlich him until he was breathing again. From the night on, he was propped until he could turn himself over. Had a friend who said we should go to this party he was invited to by a classmate of his. We ended driving out to it. We noticed the neighborhood was not too pleasant and sketchy. We saw that house had some lights on in backyard but kind of quiet for a party. I decided that we should not go since something felt really off. Friend ended finding the classmate that invited him got robbed and threatened when he went to party. It ended up being a fake party. This happened about 12 years ago. There were missing women in the area, but the city I lived in was big in adult entertainment, and the workers typically have a transient lifestyle, so we weren't sure if it was just rumors. I should also mention this is a border town. Anyways, I went out for a meal with co-workers after shutting the bar down. This was around the time a smoking bar law came into effect and you could no longer smoke under awnings. After I finished eating, I went out for a smoke by myself. It is about 3 AM at this point. The awning ended adjacent to the parking lot, and there was a car with out-of-country plates on it from across the border. The restaurant was also a motel, so there was a second story where there were rooms. As I'm smoking, this creepy guy from inside follows me out. It was winter, and he was sitting at the bar alone drinking a milkshake. Not weird in and of itself, but something was off about him. He begins to approach me, making unwavering eye contact, and starts saying really weird stuff. I figured since I was getting the cold shoulder inside, I should come stand out in the cold. This was 12 years ago, so I can't remember much detail on what he was saying, but every hair on my body stood up. I knew something was really wrong. And as he reached into his pockets and continued walking towards me, I became acutely aware of how close I was to what I now guessed was this man's car. He wasn't large or physically imposing, but I couldn't see his hands, and something about how he looked at me, it was like looking into the eyes of a predator. Cliché, I know. But I had no doubt he was planning on abducting me. I just knew. It was a primal sense of I have to do something. My back is against the wall, his car and the empty parking lot to my right, and this creep edging closer and closer, blocking my path into the restaurant door, which is about 70 feet away across the patio. He is no longer speaking, and is approaching, almost within arm's reach. I knew I had to fight him, or I would end up in his trunk. Seconds before I'm about to kick him in the balls, you could hear the footsteps of someone coming down the steps from the hotel. At that exact moment he took a giant step back and took his hands out of his pockets. It confirmed every horrible suspicion I had. An innocent person wouldn't react that way. I flicked my smoke and ran inside. A bunch of bouncers from the bar were eating, and I told them as quickly as I could what happened. Within the 20 seconds it took to explain, the man and his car were gone. To this day, I know if that person didn't come down those stairs at that exact moment, he likely would have tased me and put me in the trunk of his car. Bit more of a serious video today. Hope you guys liked it. If you liked the video, subscribe. If you want to support the channel, the best thing you can do is simply watch the videos. But if you really want to see the channel thrive, subscribe, like, comment, add to favorites, add to playlist, and share with friends. Also, don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Reddit and Insta. Thank you guys so much, and I will see you with tomorrow's upload.